Hi, good evening and welcome to day 254 at GGY, our Wednesday roundtable discussion. We have a very special guest joining us today, Prashan De Visser, President of the Centenary Front and founding board member of the Centenary Movement. I hope I got that right. Yeah. So thank you so much for being here. As you can see, you're getting the celebrity treatment from our group. We have a fairly large contingent joining us today to actually listen to you. But before we get into that, let me just introduce the guys around the table. We have Chris, Anim Aubrey, Leisha, Tassie, and I'm Chaminda. We have all the other members sitting around us at the moment, and hopefully we'll hear from some of you as well. So this week we saw quite a few things happening. Generally, Prashan, what we do is we open the discussion by going through the events of the week. And I'll just quickly go through it. Maybe we can get your reaction to all of this. And then we'll listen to you. So all of us will have to take a back step and let Prashan take the lead today. So this week we saw more examples of police brutality. I think that's one of the things that's most predominant in my mind, because the cost that activists have to pay to get a simple act of accountability. So I think we know that Sanjay and Kamant, who were protesting in front of the CID, were taken by the police, including Dr. Chamal, who actually was one of our guests a couple of weeks ago. And we now know that Sanjay was beaten up by the police. He has a broken arm, multiple injuries. Inside the police jeep. We also saw a Tamil youth from the Jaffna University being hung upside down and beaten by the police. This is a throwback to almost sort of Patalanga days, right? I mean, it's a bit of a...
In the same police station that another youth, Nagasara Alex, I think was killed.
Yeah. Right.
Same police station.
Same police station is right. I didn't know that. But then at the same time, we saw the president form a steering committee to run for the presidential election. And the chairman of the steering committee is the BOC chairman, which in itself is sort of problematic, because we know we have members here who actually can't openly support us, because standing sort of instructions from for public services that establishment clauses, I think they call it, that they can't show dissent of any sort. But the chairman of the BOC showing fealty to the president can actually run his steering committee. And BOC itself, we know, is problematic. I think, Chris, you can remind people why.
Almost 1 billion rupees in bad loans to the former UNP financier, who also owes 2.7 million to People's Bank.
Right. So uncollected, I think written off, right? Up to now. Then we also saw the government rushing to pass the OSB and now rushing to amend it. I mean, I don't know whether these guys actually read what they passed, and then the speaker himself has signed it now. Is it law now? It's law now, right? As it stands?
As of now, yeah.
As of now. President, we found this week, is at odds with the Constitutional Council over the appointment of the acting DIG. Acting IGP. This is, I think, the question that needs to be answered, right, about the supremacy of the president and how he's sort of now, his power is bleeding into the other branches of government. Then we saw money well spent on Independence Day parade, sort of glorifying himself. A military parade with no public participation. 3 poor boys from the Air Force actually had to be injured, right?
And the dancing thing.
Yeah, ballroom dancing and all that. Yeah. I call it a last hurrah for the old boy. And then finally, K.D. Ramukal resigned from the ministry from inside prison or prison hospital, where he's enjoying home-cooked food. But the amazing thing is that the president didn't ask for his resignation, didn't fire him, and but finally some sense prevailed and he has resigned. I think we have a lot of questions concerning that. We also saw 2.4 billion go missing from the Green Climate Fund. I think that's the exact term that was used by the press, goes missing, as if it went for a walk. I think they can actually say it's stolen, I feel. So this is the kind of backdrop on the day that we have you here. Prashant, so apart from being the president of the Centenary Front and founding board member of the Centenary Movement, you also have a Master of Arts in Peace Studies and Conflict Transformation. You also have a Bachelor of Arts in International Relations and Affairs. So rather than me reading out your Wikipedia or your bio, why don't we give you a chance to introduce yourself, Prashant, to our group and to everybody listening?
Thank you, John. It's an absolute joy and a privilege to be here. I've been following you guys from afar, and this is very encouraging that the fight for a just and fair Sri Lanka continues. Obviously inspired during the Aragale, but continuing and not letting any force of tyranny believe that they have their journey scot-free, and to keep on questioning them. And I believe all Sri Lankans have to play this role to preserve this democracy, regardless of how hard they try to shut us up. And so thank you for all the hard work and the consistency and the diligence that everybody in this room and around this table have done. And so I appreciate that first. Honored to be here. My background is obviously I was born and raised in Sri Lanka. I was studying. My passion growing up was never about public policy or anything like that. But I just, obviously, when I had the opportunity for a higher education, I was studying economics and foreign policy. A lot of young people who get a scholarship to go abroad sometimes end up living abroad, but I felt very strongly that I needed to come back home. And at the time, something that really moved me was the levels of violence that Sri Lanka has seen. Some estimates say that almost every 15 to 18 years since independence, Sri Lanka had some bloodshed, either along ethnic lines, religious lines, political ideology. And some research says that it may be as high as 500,000 people died in less than 76 years of independence. The British didn't come to bomb us, the Americans didn't attack us, or the Indians, it was Sri Lankans and Sri Lankans. And this happened. And so for me, I was asking the question, can a new generation rise to finally create an inclusive Sri Lankan identity? Regardless of your ethnicity, your religion, your socioeconomic background, that you could be a proud Sri Lankan citizen, but also that we create a just and a thriving society to finally live up to the potential that people said Sri Lanka possessed at independence. And so that was the vision for Sri Lanka Unites. How do we inspire a generation not to make the same mistakes? And Sri Lanka Unites started 2 years before the war ended. And we started bringing young people from across ethnic backgrounds, not just to meet each other, but to start envisioning a future together and understanding the grievances and the injustice and the misunderstandings across communal lines.
So did you have any background in politics, or were you politics adjacent? So you were a complete outsider to this particular...
Well, at the time when I was my final year of university, I started working in the Senate Republican Conference in the States and the Democratic Congress. I was interning and working towards a foreign policy position. But I felt, I needed to come back home. And the thing that really moved me to come back home is, can we end the cycles of violence? Can we work with a new generation? It's almost like trying to give the vaccination to a generation against the virus of hate and racism at a young age so that they can be mature and make better decisions than their parents did. Some of their parents were actively involved in violence. Some of their parents actively turned the other way. But what if we can stop that? And so we also started doing research across the country, and we saw that 70% of Sri Lankan youth, this is just immediately after the war, didn't have a friend outside their ethnicity or their religion. 70%. So people are like, oh, that can't be. But when you really look at it, you take 25 districts. Apart from Colombo, Kandy, Nuwara, Trincomalee, most of the other districts are mono-ethnic and mono-religious, and even if they are diverse, they have subcultures that don't really engage each other. In the Ministry of Education, you have over 10,400 schools, out of which only 112 schools have Sinhala and Tamil medium taught under the same roof. 112 out of 10,400. So it's institutionalized segregation. Even in Colombo, if you go to Ananda College, it's almost 100% Sinhala Buddhist. Saira College is almost 100% Muslim. Hindu college is almost 100% Hindu. And so you're living even here. And for those students, they may not have an experience of the beauty of Sri Lanka's diversity and to live a matured life in a pluralistic society. So for politicians who can't deliver results, who are not competent, who haven't kept their promises, who have been corrupt, when it comes to elections, then the only card they can play is the divide and rule. you create a monster, and these people don't have an experience to tell that there's no such monster. Easily they'll believe it. And this has happened over and over again, and no one was doing anything consistently about it. So we felt, can the next generation do it? So Sri Lanka Unites began it. It's not a political movement. It continues to develop leaders. Over the last 15 years, Sri Lanka United has engaged 1.5 million youth across all 25 districts. We have over 30,000 members. Today we have 50 full-time staff, I believe, and 9 offices across the country. We work in over 550 schools and 21 universities. And our goal is to vaccinate as many next generation and inspire them to lead us to a pluralistic, united Sri Lanka where we finally live up to our potential and don't destroy ourselves in insecurity. So a few years into Sri Lanka Unites, we started getting some recognition. The Commonwealth Heads of State named Sri Lanka Unites as the top 25 grassroots movement in the Commonwealth region. They also named it the top 8 youth movements in the world. Then the Queen of England gave us an award, a Points of Light award for the work we're doing. But then we started getting interest from other countries with similar realities. Post-war, high populations of youth, high rates of unemployment, corrupt governance. And they started saying this model could potentially work in our countries. So we had a delegation from Congo, Democratic Republic of Congo, come to Sri Lanka and said, this could work. We have even worse problems than you guys. Can we take some? So let's contextualize it. So I took a team from here, our teams from Jaffna, from Martha, and we flew to Congo and we helped them launch Congo Unites. Today, Congo Unites has 14,000 members. It's one of the largest youth movements in Congo. It was beautiful to see our guys from Jaffna and Martha and Colombo working together, trying to learn a little bit of French we could to help these various tribes from Congo, 200 young leaders from all across Congo coming together to build a new Congolese identity.
That was inspired by
Sri Lanka Unites.
Started here.
Yeah,
so that was the beginning. Sri Lanka Unites was the beginning.
So then we went to Congo Unites, Uganda Unites, Kenya Unites. Today we're in 13 countries, and Sri Lanka is the head office. And we've also launched in the US across racial lines. In schools in Florida, they use the same syllabus we created for kids here, contextualized over there. And now more developed countries like Germany and others, they are seeing this far-right extreme nationalism and my immigrant communities, the tensions are growing, and they're asking, can you all create content? So we're able to charge the developed countries to do it free in the poorer countries like Afghanistan or Congo and so on. So it's an honor for us to be from Sri Lanka, take something there. And so I continue my role as the president and founder of Global Unites. We have an international staff of about another 25, 30 people working in all these countries, in Afghanistan and Myanmar and Nepal and all that. Once in 4 years, we bring all these countries, the leadership together to envision what can we do. Because most of the time, it's from the global north, they come up with solutions for our countries and try to incorporate it. It's been hundreds of years since they've had civil wars and corrupt governance and nepotism and all that kind of stuff. But so they may not be equipped to find the right sustainable solutions. Whatever the problem is, those nations are better equipped to find their own solutions. I believe that there are diamonds in the rough. In the midst of the most devastating circumstances in the world, the diamonds are there. So recently somebody asked me, so what do you do? I said, I'm in the mining industry. And they said, well, what do you mine for? I said, it must be blue sapphires because you're in Sri Lanka. I said, no, something more valuable than that. What's more valuable? I said, I mine for young talent, young leaders in some of the most devastated places in the world and help create a platform for them to change their countries. But we can't change it, they can. And that's my passion in Sri Lanka as well. And that's what we want to do. But then in 2018, when the political coup took place, we're doing all this work in the grassroots trying to bring young people together. We knew that there were government individuals who was causing the hate speech, causing the violence, causing all that. They were undoing things, and they're going to happen. A lot of our team, what are we doing? We're trying all this hard work. It takes months to help reform somebody's mindset, help them see the other as your own and build that. But a racist politician who gets insecure can destroy it overnight. So then we realized it's time that we start grooming political leaders, and policy and grassroots movements needs to meet at one point. That's when you get sustainable change in nations. And we started learning, how have grassroots movements changed the world? And we started identifying 5, the big 5. The Gandhian movement, they didn't have any power, they didn't have the resources, but they started as a grassroots movement to get independence. Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King for the civil rights movement. They had no power, no resources, but grassroots, they changed their reality. Wilberforce abolishing slavery in England. Slavery was the most lucrative industry of the empire. But here's a 21-year-old movement that started saying, awakening the conscience of a nation against slavery. And they managed to do it. And now human rights was created almost based on that doctrine that came from the Wilberforce movement. You see that in the suffragette movement. Women were not allowed to vote in any country before 1918. But here's a bunch of women and men who got together and said, this is not right. We have to change it. Today, every country in the world, women vote and have come down for office, almost every country. So grassroots movements have brought about change. So we started what worked? What's the common ground here? And so we felt, yes, there's grassroots movement shifting the hearts and minds of people to the right direction. But also, there are key policy leaders that come into places of power. In Sri Lanka, many foreigners who come to this country say, beautiful country, beautiful people, extremely intelligent, extremely capable individuals. I mean, they go abroad, our guys are thriving. But the best and brightest of my parents' generation said politics was dirty and was not for them, and they stayed away. And that vacuum was filled by the worst of a generation. Scoundrels and their families just came in and ransacked the country. But even then, like a frog is in the water, just slow heat, we as a people were just accommodating, and now we're almost fried and dead. But at the other day, at one point, there was a moment of awakening where people felt like, we don't have to suffer like this. The last time we checked, was still a democracy. And so now we need to pave the way for a new generation, not to say politics is for the worst in society, to say Sri Lanka deserves better, so the best of a generation is to sacrifice. So for many of us, we're at the prime of our career. Our parents were some of the best people who joined politics. They waited till they made enough money when they were retiring, and then they came in. By then, they're juniors in a party. So certain individuals who should have been finance minister had to wait under a senior who's not even as qualified to be finance minister because they came too late. But we need a generation that says, yes, we may not make as much money, we may not be as prominent in our careers, but we have to quit those now to go full-time into this. So many of us quit our jobs, and we said, let's go. And we started off in 2019 by saying, okay, so we have to have a clear vision as a generation. What you and I have inherited, we can't blame ourselves for it. But what we give to our children and our grandchildren when we leave, we're responsible for that. So we started creating a vision for Sri Lanka at 2048. Why? 100 years of independence, and most of us will be in our mid-60s by then. It's time to retire. That's the only shot we have. We have 25 to 27 years to go for it. So we created 10 indicators that Sri Lanka would be seen as a just and thriving nation. Economic indicators, social indicators, and we call those our 10 milestones. And to get there, we said there are 3 things that need to happen. You need to have a generation of policymakers and political leaders who put country first, who learn the art of serving, not ransacking, and being held to as high standards of integrity. We felt that generation needs to have 4 characteristics. They need to be leaders of character, strong character and integrity. They need to be leaders of compassion. Right now, most of our political leaders don't even resonate with the pain people are going through. They've lived a subculture of it, and they need to be leaders of clarity of a vision, and they need to be competent, beyond doubt. And so we created a political academy, and we thought not many people would be interested, but we got 1,000 applicants in 3 months saying, I want to run for office someday, I want to serve in the public sector. So we created a 52-week curriculum, 6 months of policy, 3 months of character and integrity, and 3 months of political skills to get elected. We had great minds like, Dr. Indrajit Kumaraswamy helped us with economic policy, free of charge. The late Ambassador Jayanta Dhanapal helped us with some of the foreign policy stuff. We had amazing people from our parents and grandparents' generation who said, I want to give something back. Here's the content. We haven't spent a cent on resource people, but 52 weeks, 700 hours of content. And these students are engaging from all 25 districts. So far, every Independence Day, we graduate one batch and we take another. 170 have graduated from 120 polling divisions. Not all of them will run for general elections. Some will run provincial or local, but we're building the base. And then we said, that's not good enough. At the beginning of last year, or April of last year, we said, now we need to have our own official political platform. And that's what we call the United Centenary Front. And we, from now onwards, are determined to run at every national election.
That is a registered political party.
So in order to register a party in Sri Lanka,
5 years.
you need to have 3 to 4 years of. So we have now fulfilled all those requirements for 5 years. Audited accounts, political membership, constitution, all those requirements are met. But what they've done now is, as long as there's a pending election, they can't give you your approval. because this local election didn't happen.
Yeah.
So election commission is pretty much on under arrest. It's a lockdown. Something's happening. So we knew that was their plan. And there are 72 plus parties in this country that are registered. And many of these parties are executive committee members who are way above 65 who don't want to engage anymore. So we managed to bring those parties together and say, we're not paying anybody anything, but would you all give us, if they don't give us our own party? So we have those in our pocket. We don't want to say it out publicly because they will buy those parties and make it impossible. So we have 2 or 3 in our pocket. Yeah, exactly. Most likely we won't get it in time, so we have 2 or 3 backups. But we know that there are politicians who go around paying big money to buy it, to keep it off the market. That will force people like us to run as independents. And independent means you're paying for every person more money to make them run for office. And also you'll have a different symbol in every district. Your marketing becomes hell. And so that's where they want to push us to. Because they know we're playing. Normally new groups don't run all 25 districts. And so that's why they're trying to stop groups like us too.
Yeah,
So,
exactly. So Prashan, like everything that you've said so far really, I think, resonates with the group because we as a group at some point thought about like what we stand for. And I think all of those things that we came up with is pretty much covered by what you've said so far, right? Like we're not here for incremental change. We are here for actual proper system change where something tangible. So most of it we understand is a very ideal sort of idealistic sort of vision. How does that translate into practical on the ground action that can get the party like you said competitive in every district where you can make inroads into the current political system?
Yeah. Great question. So what we look at is, first of all, when you look at public opinion right now, the established political parties have never been more unpopular than they are right now. Right? And at the same time, most of the established parties are at the verge of splitting or have split multiple times and don't have that machinery that they had before. So these are the reasons why the possibility is higher. The other reason the possibility is higher is nearly 35% of the voting population is under the age of 35. And they have no loyalty to any of the establishment. They never have and hopefully never will. And so, for the first time in Sri Lanka's history, this whole thing of you can't do it without an established party is no longer a question mark. All the so-called charismatic political figures or whoever's been around have been tainted so much and exposed that there's an opportunity. But are we ready to pounce on that opportunity? So how do we check if our capacity is there? Number one, we want to be the party of choice for every 18-year-old to 35-year-old across the country. And so we have district coordinators, polling division coordinators, we have youth committees in all 25 districts. But what we did is, until the 4th of February, just a few days ago, we wanted it to be below the radar as much as possible. Because once they see you building it, they'll destroy you there. Like it's very hard for us to build the grassroots networks in Hambantota. But we've done it. But we got to be quiet about it. You can't go about bragging about stuff when it's much safer for us here than it is for our guys in Hambantota. Much safer for even guy in Kandy compared to Moraraga. So we've kept it, but this time now we're starting our first marketing campaign for pre-election, for people to know who we are, what we stand for, and to let them know that we are an alternative. And at the same time, there are other parties who waited for a long time to be the only alternative. And now when you have another emerging thing, there's a lot of aggressive counterattack that we knew was coming. There's a lot of online almost bullying and harassment we're prepared for. But we believe it's time to go for it. So there's an opportunity there. At the same time, how you build capacity, we believe, is we cannot outspend the establishment. This election, the general and the presidential, is going to be more money than we've ever seen. And we don't know even where this money is coming from. Well, we know. But what we have to realize is it has to be smart campaigning. We are working on data. We have polling that we've been doing for almost 2 years now, grassroots polling, to understand where we have a better shot and you pinpoint accuracy in what you're doing. So that's what we're trying to do. We've got some amazing data people, amazing grassroots survey people that's helping us. So how can we use less money but have more impact?
Okay. All right. So we see the way the campaign is shaping up. I mean, generally it's vote bank politics. No matter what happens, even today, if there's an election, a certain percentage of votes will be given to the SLPP. I mean, regardless of what has happened to the country through that administration, we know that, right? And then campaigning devolves into very nativist, nationalist, racist. I mean, all those types of sort of tactics, and that's how people seek to attain power, right? And in the media landscape that we have now, how do you sort of penetrate the bubbles that exist in society, where the mind share of people for your party will increase, that can actually translate into votes? How do you actually penetrate that?
So obviously that's the million-dollar question right now. How do you break through in this context? Because there's limited media exposure. The main parties would buy out all the slots. You're going to be challenged there. But social media has changed the game in a lot of countries around the world, where parties outside the establishment all of a sudden are pulling miraculous wins. Thailand, this young party, they almost had a win, but for certain sort of forces came and they're now the opposition. Came from nowhere. But their whole game was engaging the next generation, using digital media. Social media was very effectively used. Why do you think there's all of a sudden an online safety bill in this election?
Yeah.
That's the only thing that they cannot control. And now you're putting a gun on everybody's head saying, making them question. Even if you're convinced by a party, you're worried to keep their support because you may have consequences for that. That's the timing of this. There's nothing else to. And so that's the only way to break through. But at the same time, it's hopefully there are more people who are passionate about the democracy and want to engage. We cannot have passengers anymore or people just watching and hoping for the best. Every citizen has to say, we have to get involved. The lesser evil, that whole narrative has to go. We don't know these guys, let's go for the lesser evil. If you continue with the lesser evil, you're bound to go to hell. You have to start saying, look on competence. Now, for example, what we're saying as a party is every candidate has to declare their assets publicly, according to the Transparency International Sri Lanka standard, which means your whole family, your business associates, everybody, you have to declare it publicly. If you're a public servant, you need to declare. Out of our 225 parliamentarians, only 15 have declared their assets publicly. But how are they so rich? Where did they get this wealth? And so it's no longer lesser evil. This guy has never declared his assets. This guy has criminal cases against him. Exactly. This person has done. So then hopefully not just saying, I like this person, I'm going to quietly help. How do I really get involved and help this person pull a miracle and win this? People have to get on the ground and help. Because there are going to be a lot of people who are underdogs by the absolute definition. Can the people get behind the underdogs? And let's truly transform Parliament by getting involved and talking about issues, but helping canvass and ensuring the people who are not bought by corporates or questionable financial interests, and also by racist nationalist agendas or even party agendas. People who just say, I want to serve, and here are my qualifications, here's my transparency, here's my vision, and here's how I'll serve. Give them a shot. In every village, in every city in the country, if people decide this is the way I'm going to do it, then I think we have a shot. So we did a national poll just last week across the country. And we asked the question, would you even consider a new political platform, including JVP and all that, as considered as establishment? 80% said we will consider. Yes. That same poll about 3 years ago wasn't even 10% said they wouldn't consider. Right? So 80, that's shifting. But at the same time, when you ask them, are you looking for a charismatic personality to be the leader? Are you looking for a system change? Are you looking for a team to bring about change? Over 70% said they wanted a system change and a team as opposed to a charismatic leader. That was major change from just 2 years ago.
So there's a mindset change.
So we need to penetrate that and pounce on it. And at the same time for our party it's the representation, right? So we want to give nominations, 50% nominations for women. None of the other parties would even come up with 5%. In the local government, they came with 25%. 50%. We have plenty of competent women who will stand up and run for office. And I feel that will help people start saying, hey, we need to support this. It's time we get it on board. And then 35% for those under 35. You need to get young people involved in the political structure. If not, the frustration would lead to potentially a new cycle of violence. And so when you see that, and you see people who are competent, who have a clear vision, who are willing to be held accountable, know that they're servants of the public, and will work in that accord, get on board and help them. And I'm saying this, whatever party they're from, if you see that kind of character and these, go for the person. Don't judge them by the fact that I know their name or they seem to have a political history. Maybe they might be the winner. We have to be more refined than that. If the statement goes, what you eat is who you are, in a democracy, who you vote for is actually who you are. And so let's prove that we're better than what the 225 that we have.
Yeah, okay. Before we get into like some of the policies and I think we have some questions that we'll open it up a little bit. You said as a new movement, you will be encountering resistance and online sort of bullying and harassment and all that. And one of the things that they will pick at is your source of funding, right? Would you be able to tell us how the party is funded and what and how you sort of how you plan to launch a national movement?
So anybody right now can go to our website, ucf.lk, and you will see every rupee that has been donated and how it has been spent for the last 4 years, from the time of a political academy to now. Every donor has to be willing to say either they're coming from one of our clubs or member fees or direct donations saying, I'm donating for the party. And we do not accept any funding from people who have questionable means of saying, I'll help you, but don't know. It has to be part of a official chapter or a direct donation.
Do you take corporate funding?
As of now, we haven't. We haven't taken any corporate funding. And because if somebody is saying, we'll give you money, but we don't want you to tell about it, then that's already you're entering into blurry territory. Now, that's a dangerous business.
Yeah, because the tax will say our NGO suddenly. We get it. I mean, we're just street level protesters, but we're always accused of taking NGO funds and things like that. So
that's what we talked about.
Is there any foreign funding coming into?
No. So basically, what we're saying is it's Sri Lankan money for a Sri Lankan cause, but obviously Sri Lankan money includes Sri Lankans abroad. So we have chapters in Sri Lankan community in Los Angeles, in San Francisco, in London, in Melbourne, and places like that. They have an official chapter. They have a president, a secretary, a treasurer, and they say we need to invest in the next generation. Because a lot of people are saying we're never going to give money to the established political parties. Let's give it a shot to a new generation. Let's give them a chance to see if they'll actually serve. And I think it has to be almost like a President Obama grassroots campaign where people have to contribute. So we're starting that campaign as well, going across the country saying, hey, this kid is quitting their job, getting involved in the political arena. They cannot outspend their opponents, but get behind them. Contribute what you can. And I believe it can be done. It has been done.
That's gaining traction, or have you launched that yet? Not yet.
Officially, it's launching next week across the country. Right. And our guys are going with their membership forms and asking people to become members and give a donation, 100 rupees. 100 rupees. And then also some people say, no, I can do more than that. I want to get involved. And so if you can create that momentum, because my question is, I'm really disappointed that every political party in this country, we've been asking them, have some campaign finance laws so it's an even playing field. We don't know where this money is coming from. Even parties that claim to be clean and not corrupt, none of them have declared their assets publicly. Why don't you? And then tell us where you're getting your money. Because we know even a poster right now is about 100 rupees. For a small event, they'll have 100 posters in a village. And then these people sitting down, the chairs alone is about 100 rupees a chair. We talk about the people there, or talk about the amount of chairs that you're paying for. The video wall, this is not peanuts. You're talking about 600,000, 800,000, and these are not like 30-minute events. They go on and on for hours, so they're getting charged. Where is this money coming from? How can we trust you as the honest new movement when you're not declaring where the funding is coming from? Is it conspiracy money? Is it from the very establishment that's giving you money? We need to know. And I think if you start doing that, then you're giving a even playing field. Because if not, how are we going to compete? How can a good person ever have? Now, we on principle will never have posters or things like that. But still, even to do a leaflet, the average parliamentarian from the surveys that we have done says that they spend around 40 million on a campaign. Average. This was before inflation was crazy, right? So maybe it's now 80 million. But there are multiple candidates who ran in Colombo that have spent over 200 million on their campaign. Think of a young professional wanting to run for office. Where are they going to find that 200 million? They're going to have to sell their soul to somebody to get that money and then pay that off for the rest of their political career. So if there isn't no campaign finance reforms, then how are we going to bring that change?
Yeah, in fact, that's a question we have asked political leaders when we met them, right? About evening the playing field, because the barriers to entry for somebody new, like yourselves, is very, very high. So it favors the establishment. The incumbency always has the advantage because of that. So can I open up? You had a question, right? Yeah. Go for it. Yeah.
So I looked at your budget breakdown for 2023-2024, I think, published on your website, and the majority of your money comes from UCF Colombo chapter, UCF San Francisco chapter, UCF and it amounts to roughly around 8 million out of a 9 million budget, so it's the majority. But none of these people are named. Who are they? I'm just curious.
Yeah, so every chapter, the chapter president and the secretary and treasurer are public. So they are the ones who are saying, so for example, if they come as a chapter, they'll have an event and they'll say we all pull in money and we put it in. Because the first few years we said, no, everybody's name has to be put. So you say San Francisco chapter, let's put their name. But then what we didn't anticipate is these parties that we're competing against start calling them and harassing them or trying to find things on social media, or go after them and say, no, as a chapter, let them talk to the president or this thing. They can write to say, I want to talk to the president if you want to talk about it. And then we also found some individuals who call the individual and say, can you help me, or say, I'm going through a tough time, I heard that you gave this much money. And so there are practical issues of that. And so what we say is the president of the chapter is responsible and can say, this money came from members within our chapter at this event at this time. So we're able to disclose that. So that's our learning that we had. And then also we felt there were targeted campaigns to try and dissuade people from contributing. Saying, don't give this, don't help the establishment, they're never going to win. Why are you wasting your money? Don't support them. Help this person's trying to stabilize the country. You should be sending money there, and those kinds of things.
Right. You have a second one.
Second question. You said you're interested in running for the general election, right? I'm just curious, what's your position on Gaza?
On Gaza?
Gaza.
Okay, yes. So general election in Gaza.
No, I'm just curious as a potential public official, what's your stance on that?
Yeah, so I think the whole world has been very clear on what's been going on in the Middle East. You cannot, there is something called proportionate response and disproportionate response, whatever it is. This continued bombardment of a community like this is not condoned by anybody. I have personally worked a lot in Israel and Palestine. So Global Unites has a chapter in Palestine and in Israel. I have very dear friends in Palestine. In fact, I was supposed to go for a wedding of our national director for Palestine Unites. And so it's heartbreaking to know what they're going through. And then you also have friends from Israel Unites whose families were victims and what went on. So, but at the same time, as long as a state continues to overwhelm with this kind of power and destroy a community, and the international community has been silent for the most part, and that's been heartbreaking. You have a UN, you have all these things that it hasn't been able to stop. And also even taking a stance against violent criminals or terrorists or whatever you're calling them, take a stance and stop what's going on, but they fail. But what I do feel is that the moment it happened, it sounded a lot like our questions with the Easter Sunday bombing, in the sense of, how did this happen? How does intelligence fail like this?
In such a monumental way.
This is a nation with some of the best intelligence in the world. So you have to question that. But there has been no investigation internally to figure out what happened, but all the energy to destroy the enemy.
Exactly.
And that's questionable. For those of us in Sri Lanka, it smells a lot like what we've gone through.
Creating the situation
Right.
for them to go in.
I also feel that the international response is harmful to people fighting for justice everywhere in the world. Because that moral authority that certain countries had suddenly looks questionable. Right? So how can they come and lecture a certain country when they have been derelict in the way that they have responded? we're going off in another direction. Anybody else have any questions?
But if presidential election comes before a general election, how will your strategy change? How will you focus on that?
Great question. So, as of now, it appears that the presidential election is coming first. But it could change because it's all in the hands of one almighty executive president. And so, what we have looked is you have to look at the polls and we have to be cautious because if all the opposition voices are constantly fighting with each other, you may be playing into the hands of
Exactly what we said.
giving power with a mandate. This is without a mandate in 2 years, and we're seeing levels of questionable dictatorial behavior. Imagine with a mandate. That's scary. So I'm really disappointed that the opposition is not sitting down and start talking about, because nobody has a clear majority. You can try and make everything. Our thing is there's no opposition party that has more than 25% on the ground currently. Over 33% are saying we don't care about any of these candidates, and about 18% are undecided. So you put all of them together, the winner is the undecided question, right? So that could go either way in the last few elections. And unfortunately, some of these parties are not good at finishing election campaigns. And so you've got a master machinery on the other side. So they need to stop and question saying, how are we going to, our first challenge, the biggest threat to the democracy, for me, in my opinion, is the incumbent and the politicians that are protecting the incumbent. And therefore, that's number one. After that, we can. So some of them will have to let their egos go and figure out, is there a common candidate from all the opposition that could come together, a united force, and then fight for it at the general election.
If that is the case, would you support that particular candidate?
If the candidate fulfills a lot of our values, yes.
But then would you also commit to abolish the presidency? Because that is something that we have spoken since the Aragal era. I think that question has quietly kind of died down now.
And it's interesting that most of the opposition is not talking about abolishing the presidency.
Absolutely. In fact, when we ask this from opposition leaders, they don't give a clear answer. They don't. We asked directly from the opposition leader and from both the parties. We never got a clear, concise answer, like a clear yes. But I think all of us, like people who are in the activism space, understand how damaging this presidency has been. So would that be a criteria for you to?
Absolutely. So that's the number one criteria, is you cannot have this democracy thrive as long as you have an executive president that is violating the power of the legislature and judiciary in some way, shape or form. And this has been the problem, that every president promised to. At least Gordon never said he will abolish it, and so he stuck around and he left before it.
Maithripala kind of reduced the powers, no?
But he said he will.
All his faults.
It should have been abolition.
Yeah,
So
it should have been.
whoever the common candidate is, if that comes to be, if these guys can keep the egos aside and start saying has to abolish the presidency.
Is there room for a single issue candidate based solely on abolishing the presidency to maybe gain enough votes to do that?
I don't think a single issue, that could be something that rallies everybody together.
Yeah.
But I also believe there is a fear that the executive president wants, whoever this is, will allow certain criminals to leave the country and all this. So securing the borders, ensuring that justice can be, setting those kinds of criteria also has to be a part of it. This can't be a deal maker who says, I abolish the presidency, but I also leave the airport open for people to go as they please. You have to have a few criteria of saying these things will be adhered to. And then also a time frame of a clear-eyed understanding of this, and then immediately dissolving after that time frame for a general election, where then a clear government can come into power.
I think most of that was covered by Nordulama Sojita Hamadudu when he started Sadharana Samaj. In fact, I think they have a criteria how to abolish the executive president within 2 years, and I was in part of that movement.
Yeah.
So I knew that the candidate was not Maithripala Sirisena, it was Karujaya Surya. Unfortunately, Ranil Wickremesinghe sabotaged that in the last minute, and then we had to go with Maithripala Sirisena. So if you want to work on that, that's a good platform. Sadharana Samaja. It's now I think handled by Karujaya Surya because after Sobita dead.
But multiple parties for generations have been promising this.
Yeah.
You know, they have in every election cycle we see the same thing come up, but nobody
Until
actually
they're
once they sit in that seat, I think that's a very alluring
Including
place
the,
to be.
including
right?
the current
Of
executive.
course,
Yeah.
absolutely.
The only
Absolutely.
thing he got rid of is the emblem and the His Excellency name. That's the only thing he got rid of, nothing else.
Who did that?
Rana.
Oh, yeah, okay. Fine. All right. Sorry.
But when it comes to the presidency, also danger is that when you look at the personalities who are leading these parties as well, and the history of these parties, for me, the executive presidency in the hands of anyone who's up for running right now is a dangerous reality. But we've already seen it in the hands of the incumbent
Yeah.
without a mandate, so that's enough for us to believe we need to get this out of the way.
Yeah.
Prashan,
Yeah.
there's talk that he wants to hold on to power and abolish presidency and try to take over as PM. What do you make of that?
So there is obviously a lot of speculation, and one of it is that could he get 2/3 majority in parliament to say we'll abolish the presidency, and then he still needs to call for a referendum that says presidency goes away, then he becomes some sort of an executive prime minister that will go in for a general election. But even then, technically, general election has to be called soon, and then a new prime minister has to come into power. But what they might try to do is maneuver around that transition period to extend some level of executive powers. But it's going to be interesting chess move. If he does that, everybody who has been against the executive presidency has to now vote against abolishing the executive presidency.
Exactly.
Yes.
And they have to say, and obviously make reason as to why they're going against what they've said, but it's going to be a difficult point for them.
Right. So before getting into policy, right at the beginning you mentioned 2048 in your opening, and this vision 2048 has now been hijacked by the president himself. Do you want to give us a little background about your vision 2048?
Yeah.
And what happened subsequently?
So as I mentioned before, this journey started in 2018, and 2019 we started saying this vision, Sri Lanka at 100. We're all going to be retiring by this stage. What can we do as a generation? And we started, and then we officially launched the Centenary Academy in 2020. And so it's on multiple TV stations covered it. The vision for Sri Lanka, our 100 is our logo. You know, it's been easily documented for 4 years. But obviously, the executive, we felt there were times there was this desire for us to kind of potentially engage in conversation or try to, but we have said we're not working or speaking to any of the establishment. We want to stay away. And then all of a sudden, when he was prime minister, in his speech, he said, I have a vision for Sri Lanka at 2048. A grassroots movement that's been talking for 5 years may not get that much coverage, but a prime minister saying he has a vision for 2048 when he's going to be in his mid-90s gets a headline. Yes.
Right. I mean, yeah. I mean, having the presidency is like the bully pulpit, right? Like, I mean, there's all the media, the entire establishment is basically behind that position.
And I can also say this, so what happened for us is we had a launch for the party at the Sugadasi Indoor Stadium on the 29th of April. And we had our members coming in from all over the country. But 3 o'clock in the morning before the launch of our party, there were huge flags across Sugadasi Stadium, around Sugadasi Stadium, saying 2048 with the president's picture on it. Now, when we asked those guys putting it up, why are you putting this up now? And it's like, no, we were told because 1st of May, they're going to have something in here. 1st of May, and you don't need to be started doing this one. But to confuse, our people were coming in buses, and they thought we had lied to them, that this was actually a Ranil operation. And so we had buses actually turning around and going back. So you all lied to us. You all said this was a new movement. That's why we came all the way from Hambantota, all the way from Matara. How dare? So we had to call and convince them, saying, no, that's not the case. Look, we didn't have enough money to do branding outside Sugadasi Stadium. It was all our money. Right. And so that level of money just to spend to confuse a fledgling grassroots movement trying to serve the country. What sort of insecurity? So that was some said, take that as a compliment, or others are like, well, looks like we got. So I had to go on stage. We don't want to be negative in our campaign. We want to talk about the vision, but I had to go on stage and say, here is a leader who's 75-something years old, who's in a party that's been around for 75 years, is now saying they have a vision they're asking for 25 more years to accomplish some sort of result. and we reject that. We have our vision and we have our desire to serve. I had to make that statement because of the misrepresentation that hurt our brand or our desire to work at that time.
Right. Okay, I'm getting into sort of policy. I think we're all keen to sort of talk about the corruption aspect. We know the system is corrupt from within. What will be your plans to tackle that, and would you also then take on the issues of past corruption and scams and things like that? How would you bring sort of accountability for those kinds of things? I know we're looking ahead, well ahead, but it's good to hear your plans. Right?
It's important that governments are not in the business of saying we're coming here to catch thieves. You have to deliver on your vision and where you're going, but you have to ensure that there is no interference with the judiciary and all the mechanisms to have all the resources at their disposal to go after those who have committed crimes against the people of this country. And as long as there is no interference, as long as you have the right people held in those positions, we believe it can be done. So what's happened over the years is whenever a government comes into play, there's always been some sort of engagement to slow down the process or sabotage the process or confuse the process. And that's number one. But at the same time, we're talking about when Mahinda Rajapaksa became president in 2005, we had only 600,000 people working in the government sector. Right? Today, we have 1.5 million people. We spend 900 billion rupees a year paying for the government sector. And so what's happened is all these people, this 600,000 addition, 1.65 million today, all this addition were political appointees or political party favors. Thank you for coming for my election and helping me. Here you go. And therefore, when Yahaparani came, for all the intelligent people they had, they underestimated the state machinery was beholden unto the former president. And whatever initiative they bought, they would sabotage it, they would destroy it. Even if it was in law enforcement or going after the crimes, or even bringing basic reform to the education ministry, whatever it is. And so there's no government that can come and say, first of all, every political appointee or those who have been appointed without the right qualifications, without the right competence, and so on, technically they have been holding position illegally. And you have to unclog the system. And that might sound very aggressive, but the truth is, as long as they're there, it will be sabotaged. Their loyalties are elsewhere. In fact, I believe in every village there are 14 government workers, in every village. And so we asked them, do you know who these governments are? There's one for entrepreneurship, there's one for youth affairs. The only one every village knew was the midwife. The other 13, nobody knows who they are. So more research finds that this guy is running a grocery store, that guy actually has a job in the private sector. He's just taking a 50,000, 40,000 rupee salary on the side or whatever it is, just because that's his party fare. So you have to not just unclog the system, but the waste that's happening. 900 people. England has 3 times the population of Sri Lanka, and they have a public sector of 600,000 people. And we have 1.5 million. That has to be, a lot of corruption starts there, the incompetence starts there, loyalties are elsewhere. Sabotaging is part of their long-term agreement. And you have to unclog that very aggressively. And at the same time, when was the last time there was an audit of the efficiencies and the competencies of the government sector? Most companies, at certain points, will look at the efficiencies and audit, and we haven't. And even if you were in the position, if you're not delivering, that's where the corruption happens, when people believe they can do very little, stick around, and then still make more on the side by manipulating the system. We need to have systems of where whistleblowers are there, people are paid rewards for exposing what's going on, and create a vibrant structure. You can't go along with your 100-day plan without first cleaning the mess and then allowing it to go. That's where Yahaparani, they totally underestimated that. And that's the beginning of ending corruption. But at the same time, it starts from the top. Every party has to ensure that they do not give nominations for people who have cut corners and who have bragged about how they've cut corners. You know, what the Rajapaksas did was, every political party throughout Sri Lanka's history had a few aggressive, bulldogs kind of, weird, thuggish kind of people, and they were outside the house. They were kept for like Nagara Sabha elections, or they were kept just for protection. Rajapaksa measured them on their loyalty to him and the family, and he brought them to the center of the house. He gave them state minister positions, he gave them cabinet minister positions. And these are people who had never experienced wealth in their life. And now they had unlimited access to it and power. They always felt that they were inferior, maybe because of their financial capacity or their intellectual, academic capacity or professional capacity. And now it was a field day. And so I'm afraid that even now, some of the parties that we are hopeful of, they're giving nominations to whoever has the potential to win. That means whoever has unlimited amount of questionable funds. And we saw that at the election that was stopped. They were giving nominations to guys who were with SLPP or questionable records, but they had cash to spend. So they thought, no, our top leadership is clean, let this happen. But the moment you allow that corruption continues. We cannot flirt with these levels of corruption anymore. It has to be aggressive, and groups like yours have to continue to hold everybody accountable consistently to ensure that we don't allow this to become part of our society. Because if Sri Lanka has two terminal illnesses as a nation, on one side, we're trying to recover from the heart disease of ethno-religious tensions and racism in this country. We're trying to overcome heart failure. We're trying to unclog the system from all this racist stuff. But at the same time, we have the cancer of corruption. We cannot grow without removing the cancers from the society. Corruption has to go. We're 118 out of all the countries in the world for corruption now. Which is going down each day. And we can't say, no, it's okay, it's there, what to do. No, it's not what to do. As long as it's there, whatever development, whatever investments, we fail.
So is this something that can be achieved in one or two election cycles? Do you feel, because the incumbency is so entrenched, do you think, what kind of timeline are we talking about in terms of making that transformation?
I believe we don't have much time to waste on this. If there's any regime that comes into power that is serious about long-term change, it has to be done within the first 6 months to a year. You have to unclog the system. There will be some sort of reaction. There will be some sort of unrest, but it has to be done quickly. Because you can even take it aggressively and you can say, well, you have been holding an office that you're not competent to rule. We've received it from a political appointment. And you owe the government of Sri Lanka this much money for being paid for all this time. Obviously, without saying that, we're saying we give this much. But at the same time, the human part of it is that you look at creating new industries. Sri Lanka hasn't gone beyond tea, coconut, rubber, and apparel for all these years. All these leaders have been politics for 40 years, and that's all they came up with. Right? And we have to create new industries and new opportunities and then say, here's the training, here's the vocational training. Be an asset to this nation. Stop being a liability. Get into these industries. We'll give you the training. Here's a 6-month period. Get there and make money. Or if you're causing unrest, it's time for you to go behind bars or pay back the state for what you have stolen from the country.
Okay, so we are reaching almost the hour point now. Could we hear a little bit about economic policy from the Centenary Movement, what that would look like?
Yeah. So in 2 minutes?
No, you can take your time. Right. But how would it differ from the current system? Like you said, we are still very dependent on a few things. We do very little value addition even within those industries. So how would what would the economic vision look like under Centenary government?
I'll share a 3-4 strategy. One is, when you look at our neighbor, Mumbai University just released a study saying that 600 million Indians crossed over to middle income status. 600 million. That means technically they have about $3 to $18 additional spending power beyond the basic needs after they've been met. That's the level of wealth that's across the border. China, Indonesia, Vietnam, Malaysia. Asia is soon to have the largest middle income population in the world. And we have been stuck with tea, coconut, rubber, and apparel, and we're looking at just the West and trying to export there. But we need to start creating industries and identifying opportunities that we can create new industries to reach these markets. For a 22 million population, we're looking at a customer base of 600 million. What are the industries to create? What are the expertise that need? What are the barriers to entry? How can we get those investments in to make it happen? And if we get that game right, because you have to follow now what Vietnam was doing. They almost, with China's rise, Vietnam on the coattails managed to create industries, build in the wealth, build in the capacity, and then have their own this thing. I think Sri Lanka has to play the India's economic rise. How do we benefit from that? How do we become creative? But instead, our political leaders are more interested in getting more debt, more loans, more support, as opposed to standing up on their own feet and coming up with creative initiatives. Secondly, we have 3 million Sri Lankans who've left Sri Lanka. This is not an official estimate, but obviously Sri Lanka's GDP last year.
In the last year?
No, 3 million total. Actually, no. It was 3 million during the times of war and maybe a few years after, right? Just last year, 1 million left. So let's say about 4 million now. The million that left recently may not be doing that great, right? But the 3 million that went, so if you take Sri Lanka's GDP last year, $70 billion, right? But when we calculated roughly, this is not official stat, but if you take how much these Sri Lankans abroad are contributing to the GDP of their new country, it comes up to close to $200 billion. Of those who left, their contribution to GDP there, as opposed to what we make as a whole country. Everywhere I go, and we've been establishing these chapters for our party, and I ask them, why don't you invest back? How can we? It's corrupt. And so many, just in one trip, one tour within the east coast of the US, I collected stories that added up to around $80 million of investments that Sri Lankans tried to bring to Sri Lanka, either lost or was asked for a bribe and they packed up and left. The inconvenience, the harassment by these people who are supposed to bring things in are trying to ransack for themselves. If you take all those barriers to entry, it has a very clear and a pleasant experience. They want to give back. They want to invest. But as long as any of these guys are there, it's not coming. And so we're calling it the Operation Reverse Brain Drain. You may not be able to bring all of them back, but you can build their insight, their resources back if you create a pathway for it to come back. And we've been studying very closely. India and China have mastered this. They have a large diaspora. And they have a beautiful strategy of getting the diaspora to still be connected, still invest, and still feel very much connected to the motherland while they thrive there.
Indians have created a world for them, non-resident Indians, and they have special benefits.
So that's what we can create. But instead, we're harassing these people for their money and making it difficult for them to come here, almost to the point that the children want nothing to do with Sri Lanka. But what if we turn it around? Right? Thirdly, when you look at industries that have done well, we have to take our hats off to some of the private sector. Like, it's not because of government intelligence or innovation that our economy has survived. Yeah. Right? These industries have almost been single-handedly done by those outside the government structure. Out of them, if you look at tourism, Sri Lanka has never done more than $5 billion a year. Okay? $5 billion has been a good year for us, right? Singapore, a country that doesn't have a river or a waterfall or a forest or a beach or anything, they do $20 billion a year on tourism. And Sri Lanka does not even $5 billion. Thailand, that seems to have everything we have. I'm biased, I think we have more, but let's say they do $60 billion a year. And our guys are bragging in the height of their mediocrity about we almost did $5 billion. We are losing opportunity after opportunity. Our population are better spoken, we have the infrastructure, we can make it happen. But who is building hotels? Family members of politicians. Who's creating a tourism strategy? Family members of politicians. We're not getting the best and brightest leading for what could be our most valuable industry. And they do bare minimum, and they want us to say, thank you for stability, thank you for bringing something, when that is mediocrity at its best. We can do better.
That 5 million is questionable. No?
Yeah.
They're putting an amount per tourist per day. I mean, they're not spending that kind of money, the kinds that are coming.
And so I believe that if you get, just imagine the amount of creative minds we have within Sri Lanka and Sri Lankans abroad, and create a proper strategy. I was talking to, I hope he's okay with me saying his name, but I won't say his name. He's a Sri Lankan who went to California, and he created a food chain, 46 food chains across the US. Right? So I went to his food chain, I was like, man, this is amazing. You're the founder? He said, yeah. He's a few years older than me. I said, how do you do this? I said, man, I had to work so hard to get it done here. But if I had the chance in Sri Lanka, I can do this, man. We can create chains that could go global. I've tried. It's impossible to even start one restaurant with the amount of barriers to entry. And they say, I can do that. I can easily bring this and more. But they're frustrated. But if one day there is a generation and a leadership with this kind of transparency and opportunity, we will come and leave everything and come. That's there. And unfortunately, some parties that say they can get everybody back, they're not able to talk to some of the ones who have really thrived and are doing well in that socioeconomic background. We need the ability to have a bridge to bring those people back. And at the same time, Thailand had a strategy about 40 years ago. They took some of the 100 best cooks and they sent them to the West and said, learn the palate of the Western world. And they refined Thai food. Today, it's one of the top 3 cuisines in the world. And Thai food was the trail that they led to bring people to Thailand. That was part of their strategy. Just imagine, we haven't even done much innovation from our own. A few individuals have done. The Munidasas and the Kuruvitas and all that. As individuals, just imagine, government supported them and engaged them and made it easy for them to do it. We could become a cuisine that brings people to Sri Lanka. None of that has been explored. So you can go on and on about opportunities that are there, but none of these opportunities are pie in the sky because we have competent people, but you need to put the right person for the right job. But right now what happens is the minister who may not have an A-level education is calling the shots based on something that somebody told him to his ear, when the competent individual has to just watch and wait.
So, I mean, what you're describing is a captured state, and I think you're very right when you say that the biggest impediment to anything and everything is corruption. I mean, recently we were debating with people who were trying to formulate an economic policy. The way I described it is that creating economic policy is like, the policies are like ingredients when you bake a cake, right? So, but if there's poison in the pan, when you bake it, it's no longer a cake, it's poison. And that poison is corruption. So no matter what policies you bring in, as long as corruption exists or corruption is thriving, it doesn't just exist here, it thrives. Whatever you do in terms of economic policy falls flat. And I think it's not sustainable. So I think you're very right. I mean, I think that needs to be unclogged, as you said. So we've kind of gone over the other mark. Can I open it out again? Is there any other questions that? Yeah. Go ahead.
So, what you were discussing, economic rights, actually integral to human rights. When people have been deprived of their sources of income and sources of earning, and in a struggle for survival, people have also been, I believe, driven to accept those steps of those who are corrupt, who are driving the system in a certain way. So, what is your plan to approach that demography, those people who are in those government jobs, perhaps not entirely by choice because they need to survive? Because we have to stay with those local politicians who are corrupt, who are disrupting the system, who are not letting Indians come in and survive in that system, that we use for that. So, I think start with corruption, to end corruption, would be to try and take over that demography of population. How do you plan to approach that demography and, you need to convert at some point?
Yeah, I think it's the same people that you described earlier, the people who are indebted to politicians and so on. Maybe they have no other path, no other opportunities. So how do you reach those people?
So when things have been a certain way for so long, it's very much part of our culture. And that's why you have to have a human approach as well. Because technically, maybe up to 50% of our population is living under the poverty line right now. You can't say, yes, we are right of center when it comes to economic policy. Yes, we want to have all that, but you can't ignore the reality of 50% who are struggling. And to do that, if you reduce waste and reduce corruption, Sri Lanka's budget still has plenty of financial capacity to provide meaningfully to those who are in need. But to do it in a way that they are not made slaves of a politician who is the hand that gives. We have to remove the politician from the process and have systems in place where you preserve their dignity and help them stand on their own feet and say, this is what I'm getting to get over my current financial crisis. Right now, it's always you have to come and worship the feet of the politician and be beholden unto that politician to get it, and then this whole Natiberi Manasikarte. We constantly hear that as long as we let that continue to thrive, we are hurting them. And so, for example, there's only one place that we believe in some sort of direct engagement as a party, is that children who are malnourished under the age of 5. If you're a parent and you're trying to feed your child, and all of a sudden you lost your income, malnutrition is soaring. Government might say stability all they want, but you go around and so many MOH officers across the country, we're working in 100 villages, and they've told us they've never seen anything like it. Right? And when a child is malnourished at that age, the long-term destruction, their immunity, their growth rate, their levels of intellectual capacity, all of that is stunted. And so we've created a program where we feel like we need to immediately respond. That's a crisis. And so we're working on that. But if government is doing it, you have to identify situations where they need direct assistance immediately, but take the government entity out of that, create a process, and ensure that the dignity is there. And also it's term-based. It's not forever and ever you stay there. Give them a pathway for dignity and recovery. Give them a pathway to stand on their own feet. Don't keep them beggars because you need beggars for your campaign. Let them stand on their feet, that they will hold you accountable within this democracy. Another thing we're very passionate about, and we're doing this in a few weeks, it's young entrepreneurs. We've identified over 1,000 entrepreneurs across the country who have started businesses in the midst of this financial crisis. And out of that, the finalists, 100 entrepreneurs are coming to Colombo from all 25 districts. And we have managed to get 40 investors who are not just going to invest money in their business once they make a pitch, but also mentoring them and opening market opportunities for them. Let them create jobs for their village. Let that be the heroes. Natibari to Atihaki. We can. And then let this generation be a generation that never goes begging or never becomes a slave, that says, we will stand up. Just give us the rightful opportunity that we deserve. And when you really look at our budget, the reality is we're still spending at $800 to $900 billion on the state. We're spending around 500 billion, not dollars, rupees, 500 billion rupees on the military. 539. And then we're spending just 220 on education and maybe about 300 something on health. You mean to tell me that there is no money that we're spending on defense and the safety of our VVIPs? And we can't take and provide for those who are hurting right now? I think our former president gets 110 million rupees a year to protect him. It's better to give him a visa and get him out of here. Why are we continuing to spend? That we could throw those resources. Independence Day parades, and now another parade that happened in Dambul, all these kinds of support the people, but do it by preserving their dignity and taking the politician out of the picture.
Yeah. I mean, like you said, creating opportunities so people don't have to depend on these handouts. A rising tide raises all boats, right? So I think, yeah.
I mean, in fact, there's a recent thing where the president is hand-rolling out land deeds.
10,000 people.
To 10,000 people. I mean, coincidental that before elections.
Since I was about to say that, why not? Since you mentioned it, I was watching local news yesterday after a long time. And there was a segment in the news where they were interviewing people who had received land. And so many,
Buying the vote.
20 of such people, you know. This is studying about the piece in the
This is sort of like the Rajapaksa playbook, like keep and better. They're the ones that drag the political culture into the gutter and they want to keep it there. Right? I mean, this is all part of that. I think
I saw you put a tweet about how Ranil's attire, like his coat was going this way, his pants were going this way.
The tie was
I was thinking, yes, that looks messed up, but more than that, the values that he once preached and who he has become are so diametrically opposed. You can't. When I was like a teenager and I was listening to this guy and certain policies, and I was like, this guy is brilliant. He can do something. Maybe he needs to get to power. Who is this guy?
It's a pet topic of works because, yeah, I mean, the liberal Democrat, okay, forget everything else, forget all the problematic things from his past, but from a policy perspective, he was a liberal Democrat. He aspired, to those values, but we simply don't see that anymore. He's become purely transactional as a person and a politician.
They don't have democracy in the UNP.
That's true.
No, that's why the UNP completely vanished. Completely vanished. So Prashant.
One more thing, Prashant, there is one thing that I would like to raise. Now, with your concept and the plans that you are putting, don't you feel the constitution might be might be a stigma for you itself? Is the constitution itself is flawed? As I see it. How do you think you get about this? And you say
you with the constitution.
yeah, so you say you have equality, no race, no that, all that. The constitution itself seemingly allows corruption and all that. So how do you plan to get about that?
The current laws of the country, we'll be very cautious about talking about the constitution. But whatever we are dealt with, this is the ground that we're to play this game on. And then when you have power, there's obviously so much reform that needs to take place. And maybe like a complete overhaul of the entire structure to ensure that we don't fall into this mess again. But the reality is there's no one who has the guts to bring about that reform right now. We have to work with what we have. It's still a democracy, maybe a simple democracy, but we can fight in this democracy and we need to and get the right people into positions of power. And I feel then there could be true transformation happening. Until then, I don't think it's possible from the outside.
Yeah. So yeah, I think we need more people of good faith to come into politics. We always say, we need fresh blood, and that is exactly what you're trying to do. You're trying to break into a system that's very entrenched and bring something new. So I think we wish you luck. Obviously, I think you have a massive task on your hands. I'm sure you don't underestimate the task that you have ahead. We have some more questions. Leisha put some questions together that we received from. We have covered pretty much everything. I mean, there are. Yeah, I think when you've been talking about topics, you pretty much dealt with most of it. You even talked about the defense budget, health, education, all of that public sector excess. Salaries, pensions, burden. I think pretty much all of that has been covered. What we'll do is, in closing, first of all, thank you so much.
Thank you
with your time, and I think it's been refreshing to hear you, and you bring a fresh sort of I don't know what to call it, into a bit of hope to the political culture, right? Like we see that. So obviously we need people of good faith to follow you, and you have brought other people on this journey with you, right? I mean, people like Kavinda, I think, is part of your. You've dealt with her through Daragale and other things as well. Yeah. So maybe I think to go through everything, we might need to have you back. Maybe bring some of the other members too. Let us hear from them as well. Yeah. But in closing, what is the one message that you would like to leave us with, leave the country with? In terms of what you guys bring to the table and what we can expect from you going forward.
Okay. First of all, thank you very much for this opportunity and what you do. I believe this is crucial for the democracy and the journey ahead. I also believe that even though I'm the one who's speaking here today, we are a movement, a team. We have 18 executive committee members, 18 advisory council members, and I hope you'll get to know more about them as well. Carving their leads our education reform. We have some amazing people from agriculture perspective. Our executive committee is nearly 50% women, 50% ethno-religious numerical minorities, and every province is represented. And then on there as tokens, everybody adds great value to our conversation. So my only request is Sri Lankans who are passionate about seeing transformation, we cannot be passengers and spectators anymore. Everybody needs to get involved. And some of you might say, I don't feel like I'm a politician. I don't feel, this is not what we want to do either. Right? Our career plans are not this. But if not you, who? If not now, when? Hasn't our country suffered enough? if you're educated, you're willing, you know you have character and you will not be compromised, you want to make a sacrifice and get involved, we need that now. Don't say I'm young, I'm old, I'm a woman, I'm a younger man, I'm an older man, doesn't matter. We have to. And so please come. We are a party that will not give you nominations, won't give you nominations because you don't have money or you don't have the right connections or the political pedigree. We will give nominations for people of competence and the right character. And let's build the best candidate list that this country has ever seen and pull off a miracle. I think it can be done. And we're encouraged. There are few people in Parliament, in the establishment, are realizing these guys are doing what we should have done 30 years ago. One guy said, why don't you come and join us? I said, no, I won't. Then he said, well, but you all can't do it by yourself. It's impossible. You're a good guys. You all should come and work with us. We'll give you all this. I said, if you were my age, what would you do? He said, I wish I did what you all are doing now. And so we told them, if you're a good people on this thing, you come and help a new generation not make the same mistakes. Come and stand by them. Open your networks. Make it possible if you're good. And we're asking other people who are watching, please get involved. We can do it. We have to do it. And this may be a closing window. And we need to.
Great, yeah, you speak in our language, Prashan. I think everything you said pretty much resonates with us, and I think it's very much in line with what we've been espousing as a group is citizen activists, nothing more. All we are also trying to do is keep people engaged because we saw something, like you said, awaken in the people, like we were awakened by the Aragale, because that was a moment for transformational change. And somehow that has now been undercut, and everything that the Aragale gained has now been eroded by the same system and they're protecting and fighting like hell to make sure that people like you, movements like you, won't come through. So, like you very rightly said, the OSB and ATA, I mean these are just like heat-seeking missiles to movements like yours. But let's hope that people recognize the need of the moment, that we will not fall into the same traps that we have done generation after generation, and that we are awake enough to open our minds and hearts and accept a new political movement into our overall discourse. So thank you, Prashan. Thank you for all you do. Clearly, there's a great deal of commitment from you and your team. So we wish you all the very best. Guys, anything you want to add or to say?
I just want to have, you have this, your Centenary Movement post or whatever, right, when you go on TV. I just want to suggest something. Why don't you have quiz with I want to be free, and then you have this Centenary. You go.
There you go. We'll send Imran to you as a fashion consultant. We'll send Imran to you as a consultant. Thank you to do that. But thank you, Prashan. You've been very generous with your time. So I think, guys, shall we wrap it up?
My quote.
Sorry. Yes. Sorry.
We always end with a quote.
Yeah, okay.
I look for something that I feel is suitable for the
For the
time.
moment, yeah.
So,
sorry, I don't have my screen.
that's all right, I'll read it out. Once a government is committed to the principle of silencing the voice of opposition, it has only one way to go, and that is down the path of increasingly repressive measures until it becomes a source of terror to all its citizens and creates a country where everybody lives in fear. Harry Truman.
Yeah.
And I feel that is.
Yeah, you're describing the moment right now. You're describing the moment.
OSBs and ATAs and broadcasting bills and
attacks on
rehabilitation bills and all those things.
Absolutely. So thank you, Prashan. You always find the right quote at the right time. And thank you, Anu, CK. Thanks to all the members who are here, and especially to you, Prashan. Please do come back.
Of course.
Please come be seen also. Yeah, the ones who can't be seen, should we start naming them? Please do come back, and we'd love to invite other members of your team whenever they're free to drop by. Next week we have TISL and #generation here. We'll talk about the online safety bill and the work they are doing to counter the effects of that and all of that. TISL will come to explain to us
what it entails.
And Supreme Court challenge and all of that. And then the week after we have Iran rejoining us. he joined us off camera once. So let's listen to them. I think some of the things that you mentioned, we can put it.
That was where we first heard how difficult it is to get into
politics. Because he's a corporate guy who can get into politics.
Yeah, before you speak, for resilience with Prashan's thoughts.
So let's put it to him. So thank you so much. So that's a wrap for day 254. We're back in our street call on Sunday 255. So anybody who's in the area, please do join us. And we'll see you again for the roundtable next week. Thank you. Good night.